Hello everybody and welcome back to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast. During this international break there might not be too much to talk about for Forest, so I've finally given in and let the famous Aussie pundit on Garibaldi Red, David Boldeman, to join me to do an all-time Forest best Premier League 11. The rules will be explained very shortly as we get into it. But David, good to see you. No noise complaints, I'm guessing, this week, given that there's no football on.
No noise complaints, but I did enjoy 13 minutes of English international football for the first time since 1997. So that was a positive moment for me to jump on, and what a proud moment for us as a club to have a player so intrinsically paramount to the success of Nottingham Forest at the moment. It was great to see him come on. I thought he looked good. So, but yes, you've relented, Maxi. You've relented.
And I was just, and I was just about to ask you, David, what you actually made of Morgan and his performance. I thought when he came on, I thought, that brilliant pass he played and just, there was a lot of plaudits on him. And I just thought his energy and, the way he plays for Forest, you could tell he brought that to England. Shame he didn't get, a bit more time. I thought he would have started. I kind of predicted him to actually start. So there was me in the wrong, but he's on the right path now in a way, and you've just got to hope if Lee Carsley does get that permanent England job, David, that Morgan might become a full-time England international.
Well, he's a pretty handy squad player for the England team, given he can play wide and he can also play deeper and in the 10 spot. So for starters, that makes him a useful international squad player. He just didn't look out of place. Sometimes the international players, they make their debut and like, that certainly wasn't the case this time. He just looked creative, a whole bunch of passes, whole bunch of liveliness. I think he'll be picked again. Great.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Yeah, well done, Morgan. And we look forward to talking more next week, of course, when the football returns. But for our main episode today, as we record this, we are doing an all-time Forest Premier League 11. So, David, you have kind of gone out there and got your all-time Premier League 11. I've got a few suggestions to throw into the mix, but I'm kind of letting you take over this podcast. Just give the Garibaldi Red listeners and viewers the lowdown on how this works, because it's a little bit different, isn't it?
In 2015-16, we named the all-time greatest Forest team ever. If we were to do that exercise now, it would be the same team. This is not that. This is the all-time Premier League 11, and we're going to push that into what squad would we choose if we had a squad of all-time Nottingham Forest players who have played in the Premier League. So that to be eligible, you have to have played in the Premier League, which started in 1992-93 for Nottingham Forest. So that means that Jed Spence, for example, is not eligible. Bree Samba is not eligible. Wes Morgan, Michael Dawson, Andy Reid, David Johnson, Peter Shilton, Trevor Francis, Archie Gemmill, a whole bunch of them are not eligible. We are only able to pick from the players who played in the Premier League, and we are only considering their body of work from when they were in the Premier League. So that's a bit of a bummer for some of the late 80s, early 90s players that were better in the late 80s as we were pushing for titles and winning FA Cup and League Cups. But it is a Premier League all-time 11. And this is the culmination of Max and my friendship, because I've been telling Max that you should let me do a Premier League all-time 11. So it is a terrific exercise. So thank you, Maxi, for relenting. I think it's worth calling out, look, why do we love Nottingham Forest? There's a whole bunch of Nottingham Forest stories that we're absolutely super proud of. Like from Robert McKinley, the guy that played 265 consecutive matches and only played matches for Nottingham Forest, through to Wear the Reason Arsenal Wear Red, all the Brian Clough days, the consecutive European Cup championships, all that stuff. But we're also proud of what we did in the early days of the 90s in the Premier League. So I think it's worth taking a quick trip down memory lane, Maxi. So I'll hope you'll divulge me and let me give you a 4-minute history of Nottingham Forest in the Premier League. So Forest played the first televised match of the Premier League, with Teddy Sheringham scoring a goal in a 1-0 win over Liverpool. Now, don't get caught out, Forest fans. That was not the first goal in Premier League history. It was just the first televised goal. Brian Deed of Sheffield United got that goal. In 92-93, the then perennial bridesmaid competitors for league titles and some cup successes in the late 80s, Nottingham Forest finished the season 22nd with 40 points. and were relegated, with that being the catalyst for the retirement of Brian Clough. Pre-season, Des Walker left for Sampdoria. Teddy Sheringham left at the start of the season. Roy Keane would depart at the end of the 92-93 season, Maxi, for a record British fee of £3.75 million.
Wow.
A record. If that was translated to today, that would have been £120 million sale in terms of how much the transfers are worth now. So can you imagine we had a player not only that good, but then coming out of our squad? Just it's a heartbreaking thing to just think about what could have been if Forest could have survived. Then Frank Clark stepped into the void. He convinced Pearce to stay and set out on a promotion chase that was immediately successful in the second tier of English football, with Forest finishing second. The 94-95 team, Max. If you've not gone down and looked at the YouTube clips, which I'm sure you as the host of a Forest podcast have definitely done, what a team. Finishing third in the Premier League, a record that still stands for the highest finishing plays of any promoted team, and arguably a record that will never be broken, with the likes of Collymore, Brian Roy, Lars Bohinen, Dave Phillips, and Stuart Pearce back to his best, with Cooper and Sheddle in the middle. They took the Premier League by storm. And ultimately losses to Blackburn, double losses, and a horror November preventing them from taking the whole thing. So word of warning, it's going to be pretty tough to topple that 94-95 all-time Forest 11 in this one. Maxi, from there, heading into 95-96, we had the sale of Collymore, the disastrous Andreas Alenzi signing. Bohinen left. Brian Roy wasn't as good. Frank Clark departed in December 1996, and despite Stuart Pearce proving a revelation as a player manager, we just couldn't survive. Did you know in the 1990s we had player managers, Max?
Yeah, in fact, I was reading a bit of, luckily living in Manchester, I'm near the National Football Museum, and I went the other month and I saw like this bit about player managers and how kind of almost prevalent they were back in the day. And yeah, it just like, it's like almost Sunday League stuff now, isn't it? If you could you imagine if Forest had a player manager? Ryan Yates was the Premier League, player manager. Sorry, David.
It used to be a good trick, because you could sign a player that wanted to become a player manager. And then you would get them as both a player and a manager. So Stuart Pearce won the Manager of the Month award. I think it was in March or April. Not sure. Someone could get into the comments, or maybe even earlier than that, when he came in as a player manager, on absolute fire. But yes, it is very Sunday League. Chelsea loved it in the late 1990s with Gianluca Vialli and Ruud Gullit. And trivia question for Nottingham Forest peeps out there: Stuart Pearce was not the last player manager of Nottingham Forest. It was former England international David Platt. He played 2 games. In the 97-98 season, it was the Hooydonk years, where we saw a return to the Premier League after another successful First Division season, beating out Middlesbrough. And then the 98-99 season, that was just an absolute disaster, with the most notable moment being the holdout of Pierre van Hooydonk, who didn't feel the club was ambitious as he was. Can you imagine today if Morgan Gibbs-White just said, I'm just not playing, because you are not signing any players, Max?
Yeah, it's mad. Nuts.
It was absolute madness. And so then we saw the departure of Steve Stone, and then that tragic 8-1 loss to Manchester United, and then the wilderness for 23 years, 2 narrow escapes. I don't even know how many signings. So that is the body of work that we've got to pick from. But I'm very proud of Nottingham Forest in the 1990s in the Premier League. We were one of the foundation teams. We were the team picked to play Liverpool in the first match. We've got some great players to choose from. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a bore for you going down that memory lane, Maxie. I quite enjoyed telling that story. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, it was all right. Yeah, all right. You're like a history teacher. It's like being back at school. It's only
very didactic.
Yeah.
Very didactic is the word.
Thankfully,
all right, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do it. Thankfully, I don't do history at uni. Right, let's start with the goalkeeper, and we'll flash up a few graphics and team selections and stuff as we go, which will look nice if you're watching on YouTube. Obviously, if you're listening, then you will just have to rely on our brilliant audio descriptions of the players. Right, let's start with the keeper then. David, kick us off.
I'm going with... Look, this was tough. Mark Crossley was unlucky to miss out, having been our second most capped Premier League player, but I'm going with Keylor Navas, 3-time Champions League winner, 110 caps for his country, quarter-finalist at the World Cup. If you ask Costa Ricans who is the most famous person from their country ever, it is Keylor Navas. His Forest story, although brief, just came in, just absolute legendary debut in that Leeds match. Man of the match, cult hero immediately. I was the key signing really in saving us. I thought we were in all sorts of trouble when Dean Henderson went down. Great communication, great shot stopper, just absolute legend. Look, it's tough. How do you pick a player who's only played for half a season? Maxie, do you share my admiration for Keylor Navas, or would you have someone else?
Do you know what? Yeah, I would. I was tempted to give Vlachodimos a shout. No, I'm only joking.
Wayne Hennessy.
Yeah. No. So I probably agree. I would. Yeah, I would put Navas in there purely because it was. I think it was a. I can't remember which team Forest played. It was definitely one of the two. It could have been somebody like Spurs, and the Forest fans were singing Keylor Navas. He's won more than you. It's brilliant. You know,
it's funny.
Almost gloating about having him in goal. Yeah, I agree. Short but sweet, great stint, and I think he was a big instrumental part in obviously Forest staying up in that season.
Absolutely needed him. But shout out to Mark Crossley. Could save a penalty, Mark Crossley, and tells a lot of great stories. So he would certainly make our 25. That's what we've got to pick from. On to the left back. Well, goodness, Maxie, this one picks itself. So I think if we were to poll 1,000 Nottingham Forest fans, we would get 1,000 voting for Stuart Pearce. The free kicks, the goal contributions, 94, 95, 11 goals in all comps makes him arguably, the numbers are a little bit tough on the records, but he might be the highest scoring left back in a season in the Premier League. The passion of the player. Can you imagine also, just think about how times have changed if we've got a player in our team whose nickname was Psycho? That's not politically correct, is it?
No, probably not. No, in fact, I think I actually, when Stuart Pearce was appointed as Forest manager, but he didn't take over till the following season. Can you remember that a few years ago? It was Garibaldi as interim manager. I can remember actually having a flag that had Stuart Pearce and Psycho on. So there you go. I was holding it up at a Forest game. There's probably a picture of me somewhere with that. Let's hope it doesn't get found out.
Well, maybe someone can post that into the socials for us to find a picture of Max. But yeah, he was just so Forest through and through. That goal in the FA Cup final, what a free kick! Like, he was as good as Beckham at those free kicks around that time. And it's a shame that he gets remembered for that penalty miss because his penalties were terrific as well. He's such a good player. So daylight second between him and anyone else.
Who would you give as a backup, maybe, if you had to give a backup to that left back position, the second choice?
I'd probably say Renan Loddy but he's not like lighting it on fire, is he?
No. I mean, I'd actually argue that. Yeah, I think you know, when Forest signed him, it was similar to Navas. Obviously, I think Navas did a lot more and obviously contributed more, but you know, it was a bit of a fairly big name, and it was maybe one of the first kind of statement signings from Forest kind of back into the Premier League. So yeah, I kind of make a point for him. But yeah, I mean, I'd have gone with Stuart Pearce, and obviously I wasn't around to see Stuart Pearce play. You know, I was born in, sorry to make you feel old, David, and probably make everyone feel old who's listening, but I was born in 2004. So obviously my first time seeing Forest in the Premier League was, go on.
Were you there for that match where he came out and they've got the clip on the Forest YouTube channel?
Yeah.
That just seems like it was just deafening.
Yeah, it was unbelievable that I can remember it. And I was only I was very young, and yeah, I can just remember that against Blackpool and with players like Matty Fryer and people like that. And I can remember just that start to the season. We went away, didn't we? And we beat Sheffield Wednesday 4-0 at Hillsborough. I can remember then Psycho Stuart Pearce coming over and clapping the fans, and it was just a special start to the season, albeit it cost us financially with the transfer embargo a few months later and Mad Fowler's in charge. But there we go. Right, on to centre backs.
All right, so this one's going to be contentious. So whenever you do these teams, you can fall victim to some recency bias. So I'm just going to call out that a team of centre-backs who had to mark Robbie Fowler, Andy Cole, Ian Wright, Alan Shearer, Chris Sutton, Dwight York is going to be hard to unseat even if a Player of the Year award was given to a centre-back. So the first centre-back I'm going to pick is Colin Cooper. So Cooper capped twice for England in 1995. I think it was against Sweden and Brazil. Maybe he should have been in the squad for the 96 semi-final against Germany, because he was there was a free kick that he takes ahead of Stuart Pearce from distance, which is just absolute ripper from distance. It's not a normal region as well. It is just unbelievable. And so he was a record signing at the start of the 94 season for a then £1.7 million. Solid in defence, dependable leader. He was considered stronger than Steve Chettle in the partnership duo that they had, and he could also kind of fill at left back as well. So if we're running with Murillo in the squad and Pearce cops an injury, then maybe we can switch Colin Cooper to cover for Stuart Pearce at left back and accommodate Murillo in the odd occasion. But Stuart Pearce typically, when he played, didn't miss too many matches. But 2 caps for England in a time when Tony Adams and Keown and a few others were floating around. He's no slouch, Colin Cooper, by any means. Not as heralded. He only played, 3 seasons for Forest, but he was ever present in that 94-95 team, Maxie.
Yeah, I would. Well, I can see which other one you've got. So, I will let you give the other centre back first before I come in with my suggestion.
All right. Well, look, this one took me a while to think about of whether I go, but I just decided Steve Chettle, all-time Forest Premier League appearances at 174. He's the 3rd most capped Nottingham Forest player ever. Debuted with Nottingham Forest in 1986, playing through to 1999. He was through from the Forest Academy, so he would have, if he was playing today, would be heralded the same way that the great Ryan Yates is. He played in 3 different stints in the Premier League for Nottingham Forest and was one of Clough boys, having won League Cups and FA Cups. He stuck with us for that entire decade and retired with us. He's just too much of a club legend. If Stuart Pearce doesn't exist, Steve Chettle is a captain for Forest for 10 years. Absolute legend of the club. And just think how high he must be regarded to hold out our dynamic young centre-back in Murillo. Max, have I convinced you that those two should be centre-backs? I haven't.
but then I guess, and maybe a lot of people listening will, understand that I didn't see those players back in the day. Obviously, hear lots about them. I've met those players. I've watched clips and stuff like that. And I don't get me wrong, I appreciate it, but I think I keep Steve Chettle and I would put Murillo in for Colin Cooper. I just think Murillo in recent years, yes, he's only been at the club for what is it, a year now, not even that probably. And he probably will leave Forest in the next year. However, come on, it's Murillo, David. I just think you've got to include him. If we're talking about an all-time Forest best 11, then I might not actually include him. But if we're talking about all-time Forest Premier League, I think Murillo has to come in there. So no disrespect to Colin Cooper, but I would switch him. We love Coopers at Forest, but I would switch Cooper for Murillo. That is my argument. I can't really give you too much to back it up, other than it's because I'm young and I've watched Murillo and I just think he's brilliant. And one day he is going to score from the halfway line. And I just think his energy around the football club is what Forest need.
Well, certainly the dynamicism of Murillo, the way that he gets forward. Colin Cooper could play a pass,
but he couldn't
not
score
quite as well as Murillo could. But Cooper, look, he's been capped for England. 2 caps for England. That's twice as many as Morgan Gibbs-White currently has. He's no slouch, Colin Cooper. So, but it's close. This is the beauty of debating these things. I guess the question to ask is, what would Murillo need to do to unseat one of these two? And I think a solid mid-table 10th finish for Nottingham Forest this season could perhaps push one of those two out. But it's hard to argue with a team that finished 3rd, Max.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, let's move on. On to the right back.
Right back, I think this is a position that could be won. So this is one that's opened. And if we were in the transfer market for all-time Premier League Forest teams, I'd be tempted to try and strengthen this position. So I'm running with Des Little, 113 appearances for Forest in the Premier League, consistent presence in that 94-95 team, could get forward, could cross the ball, linked up very well with Steve Stone He had to mark some notable players on the left in Giggs, McManaman, Wilcox, Limpar. Handful of pretty handy players there. His crosses, he wasn't as accurate perhaps as, Neville or any of these guys in his heyday became. But when I'm looking at him versus the others, and I think you'll agree with me here, Max, that over the past 2 seasons, we haven't had an out-and-out right back that has just gone and owned that position. So the fact that we're picking Des Little just means is more an indication. We had Serge, we had Gonzo, we had Nico. There's still argument that Olarena should play there if we play the lad from Aston Villa or West Ham or wherever he's from, Moreno. So that's I'm landing on Des Little. What's your take on our right back stocks? That's probably the question of relevancy for now.
I mean, I think it's a position Forest have needed to strengthen in for a while, so it makes a bit of an all-time Premier League 11 a bit difficult to pick that position. Would Nico Williams get a shout? Probably not, to be perfectly honest. That's no respect to Nico, but I don't think he doesn't do anything amazing. He goes under the radar a little bit at times, bit of an underrated player, but I don't think he beats. I'll speak to grandparents and things about Des Little. Seemed like a good player. Let's move on to the midfield, and we look at. What formation are we playing here, David?
I'm thinking based on the players that we have available, we're playing a 4-1-2-3. So I don't think we need to play 2 holding midfielders because of the holding midfielder that we've got access to. So we're going to run with 1 holding midfielder, and that enables me to pick 2 very attacking midfielders in front of that player. So we're going to run with Roy Keane. It's just the sad story of Forest's first season and the unsuccessful, and what could it be? So 40 appearances for Forest in that first Premier League season. He tells the story of how disappointed and dejected he was when Forest got relegated, and he didn't quite have the influence on the dressing room by then to be able to fire them up and get them going. He had some off-field incidents and distraction at the time. Boy, what a player he turned out to be, and a captain that he could have been. If we'd have been able to keep him, how good would he have been in a third place 94-95 Forest team? Our fortunes could have been completely different. It's an absolute no-brainer. Roy Keane is the CDM for the Forest all-time 11.
Ryan Yates doesn't come close.
Well, no, and he can't even. Well, sadly not.
I've done it on purpose, Dave.
I know you have. Well, I do like Ryan Yates. Sometimes. I just don't think he's as good as he doesn't have the quality of some of the other players. I admire his heart. He's certainly a great ball winner. And I think the strength of Roy Keane actually in this team, Max, does David Phillips out of a spot in the team. So David Phillips was signed to replace Roy Keane.
Yeah.
David Phillips, 62 caps for Wales. He was the player of the season in that promoted team from 93-94. Extremely versatile, could hit a free kick, could do a backflip when he scored as well, David Phillips. And a very popular Forest player from that era. But yeah, he's going to fall victim to Roy Keane just being an absolute ball winner. So, I guess if we were to pick one of today's, other midfielders in and around this, because you can see where I'm probably going to lean, in terms of a CDM, who do you think gets the nod? Who was our best? Is it Mangala or is it Danilo? Who's the standout from that group?
In terms of recent years, you maybe it is a bit of a funny one, midfield. I mean, we can talk about attacking midfielders, and obviously we're going to get into it, but you look at just like Morgan Gibbs-White, right? He's obviously going to be the one we pick, right? But in terms of defensive midfielders, we've never had anyone, certainly I don't think in the last in the past few seasons Forest have been in the Premier League, that has completely blown us all away. So maybe I had to pick one. I genuinely would make an argument maybe for Ryan Yates, but I don't think he comes close to Roy Keane, and that's from someone that never saw Roy Keane play. However, I think Roy Keane's personality wins it enough.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well,
Roy Keane did massively like Ryan Yates, though, David. If you can vaguely remember, obviously, when Keane had a short spell as Forest assistant manager, every time Roy Keane does punditry on Forest, whether that be for Sky, ITV, whoever. He'll always tell the story about that one of the only players I liked when I went into Forest with Martin O'Neill, and that was during a pretty poor time for the club, finding themselves off the pitch, was Ryan Yates, and he talks about his just energy, enthusiasm, athleticism, and Keane was full of praise for him. So there we go. Right, on to the next midfielders.
So we're running with two cams because we've got Roy Keane. So look, we've talked about him already. So Morgan Gibbs-White is going to be one of those. So gets a call up into this team. Look, it was closer for me. I was close to putting Phillips in, but the England call up and just the passion that it was close. Like, he's a pretty good player, David Phillips, but he got capped for England. And he's just he's so good. He's been the heart and soul of Forest since we've been in this stint of the Premier League. Like, it almost feels like he was part of the promoted team. He feels that much a part of it. And then when you go back and watch the highlights, you remember that he was in the shootout. But just imagine Morgan Gibbs-White in this team with access to these players and who he's going to have up front and who he's got supporting him behind him. He would just be an absolute revelation, especially with the support of Phillips and the other player and Roy Keane that I'm going to pick in a second. So Morgan Gibbs-White, absolute must. And then the other cam I'm going to run with is Lars Bohinen. So technically brilliant, creative player. You could argue that his departure and not Stan's was really the death knell of the 94-95 team. So he had this weird clause in his contract where he was able to trigger it because there was a buyout clause for the top team. So Blackburn at the time were the champions and they played what they needed to trigger that clause. So it would be like Morgan Gibbs-White being signed for Manchester City for like £10 million now, like just an absolutely absurd fee, which just didn't seem anywhere near high enough. He was such an attacking player. He wore number 9. He did this brilliant corner where he used to do these corners that used to curl in. And so he scored off a corner one time that got attributed, I think, to Steve Chettle.
It's funny because my dad always tells me about there used to be someone that would stand or sit in the trend end with like I don't know what it was, and they'd like do this chant about Lars Bohinen, and I'm not going to try impersonating the chant, but they'd like go Bohinen or something like that. So there you go. That's kind of all I know on him, to be honest.
Well, he was technically brilliant. He did this goal as good as any Matt Letizia goal. I think it was against Tottenham where he chipped it in for the 4th goal. So he was absolutely instrumental to that 94-95 team. And getting forward. So we're going with Lars Bohinen. So that leaves us with 3 players up front. I would say that I think you could argue James Ward-Prowse or Elliot Anderson after a solid year or two might be able to make their way somewhere into this team, maybe. But it's going to be it would have to be at the expense of Lars Bohinen because you're not going to unseat Roy Keane or Morgan Gibbs-White, really, are you?
Nope.
All right. On to the forwards. How am I going so far, Max? You liking this team?
Yeah, no, it's looking good. It's looking good. I have faith if this team was in the current day, it'd do all right in the Premier League.
All right, fair enough. All right, on to the left wing. So because we're playing a 4-1-2-3, look, Brian Roy is the all-time top goal scorer in the Premier League for Nottingham Forest with 24 goals. Pace, dribbling skills, goal scoring ability. If you watch any of the clips from that day, it is really the Brian Roy show. He got this pretty crucial goal against Manchester United when we beat them. He's either setting up most of the goals or certainly scoring them. And in a time when playing for the Netherlands was pretty tough, he managed to bag 30 caps. Absolute legend. In today's game, he would hold up as a winger, could be an inverted one. He would be very, very difficult to deal with. But boy, he benefited from the strike partner that was next to him. So I think Brian Roy's an absolute standout pick, isn't he, Max?
Yeah, I've got no complaints. Hear lots about him and I've seen lots of clips and stuff, and he's always on, when you watch Premier League years and things like that, it's always Brian Roy's goals come up. So yeah, happy for him to be there. I've kind of got no complaints there.
And you're certainly going to have no complaints about the next one. So Stan the man, 22 goals and 37 appearances in an absolute barnstorming standout season. He was brilliant the season before. That is an output. Blistering pace. He talks in interviews about the rattle of the seats when he used to play at the City Ground because whenever he would touch the ball, the the clacking of the seats would go. He would love a switch at a long pass to his wing and forward plays. If he was playing with Morgan Gibbs White, boy, would they be a combination. And one thing we could say is that today's athleticism is a lot higher than it was in the 1990s. Stan Collymore would be an absolute gun now. He was that good in that era. And it was a shame he was against the likes of Shearer, Sheringham, Cole, Ferdinand, Wright and Fowler for getting into that England team. And it was just a dud signing move for him going to Liverpool, I thought. They never really built the team around him. He was just an absolute beast. And if you go and watch the top 10 Collymore goals for Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, I've seen them, actually. I've seen them.
They stand up against top 10 Nottingham Forest goals ever. He's so good, that guy. So it's tough to argue. And I think he was. If
you had to have a backup as a striker, or in fact somebody from the current team, who do you think would be?
I think this is going to. On right now, you have to pick Chris Wood, but from their body of work, I think Taiwo was a touch ahead of Chris Wood. I think Taiwo in this team with Gibbs White and the trouble that he caused and the amount of chances that Brian Roy and those others would set up, I would go with Taiwo, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
What do you think?
I don't know. Like, I think the same for Chris Wood, right? Like, if you name me a Chris Wood or a Taiwo goal now, you can't think of a goal where it's been a brilliant goal and they've picked up the ball and ran from. Do you know what I mean? Like, Chris Wood maybe stand that one. I'd actually say probably against Man City when Forest equalised because of the teamwork around that goal. That was a great goal.
Newcastle goals.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, true, actually, yeah.
Newcastle. That's what made the Newcastle goals so good, was that they were so surprised, and then he did it twice.
Yes, true. No, in fact, actually, the chip probably. So yeah, I'd give the Newcastle, but like for Taiwo, I don't know, maybe stand that goal would be probably. I mean, him scoring early at Old Trafford was good.
That was
good last season when he had that one-on-one, and like I remember being in the away end and I was quite high up, and obviously living in Manchester the past few years, it does make it. To be honest, I tend to dislike Manchester United and Man City more than I do Derby these days, and I can remember being in the away end, David, and like. I can remember when Taiwo got the ball and he was through, and it was like really early on in this game, and I was thinking, just score. And he was like, he just kept running. I was like, Taiwo, just shoot. And everyone kept telling him, and it like somehow went in. And yeah, that away end went into pandemonium. And then Willy Bolly scores that header, and then Joe Worrell decides to do whatever he decided to do. And then a bit of referee controversy with shock. Stuart Atwell and Forest ended up losing that game. I was really, I remember that end of that game, a lot of Forest fans came out saying, oh, well, we only lost 3-2 to Manchester United. We were 2 goals up. I was furious at that. It took me a lot of calming down to do.
Yeah, that one was brutal. But we're trying to be, this is a positive.
Sorry, David.
This is a positive. Sorry. We're talking about all the legends. And if you're going to say, and maybe get it out. Here's a question for the comments. Is peak Taiwo better than peak Chris Wood? That is actually the question.
That is a very good question.
Peak Taiwo versus peak Chris Wood. Who gets the nod? But, of course, Taiwo scored our first goal in the return to the Premier League, which should have been Jesse Lingard's goal, actually. But,
yeah,
Jesse Lingard, I can confirm, has not been selected at right wing for this team.
Jesse Lingard wouldn't even come near the changing room for me, if we're kind of going through all the available positions in this. Right winger.
All right, this one is going to be contentious. I have a feeling you're going to argue with me on this one, but I'm picking Steve Stone. So in today's game, Steve Stone would be a right winger. His stamina up and down, pace at crossing the ball, his work rate, leadership and inspiration. You wouldn't have to worry about his ability to get back and defend. He did earn an England call-up and was capped for England during Euro 96, sitting behind Darren Anderton on the right and holding out Beckham. So he must have been pretty handy. His departure when he left at the end of that relegated season in 98-99, you just knew we were in trouble in terms of coming back into the Premier League. So he was another of those cult heroes from Forest around that time. And this one was as tough because I also thought about playing him in the centre of midfield, and then just thinking about it, I was like, I know, I have a feeling I know who you're going to say Mac should be.
Do you know what? I wouldn't actually say it's a definite answer. I'd just argue. I mean, we could even argue about Alanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi coming close to kind of the flanks and in terms of picking the wingers. I mean, I do think Brennan comes a little bit close to that right wing spot, and I think I just think he was a big impact on the club, but then did he do that? True. Did he do that much in the Premier League though? Is honestly my question about Brennan Johnson. Like, don't get me wrong, I think he was a great player. Did so much for Forest in the Championship, such an instrumental part in getting us up. But in the Premier League, he would just get bullied off the ball so much. And I just thought that for Forest to get that price tag on him, it was a good move for the club because it didn't save us from PSR ultimately. It probably should have given the rules, but yeah, I just think that he obviously was he was an academy graduate. I think if we're doing an all-time Forest 11, I think Brennan would actually beat Steve Stone. But given we're doing it on the Premier League, I think your argument about Steve Stone and I'd probably just think that he comes close given Premier League success compared to Brennan. So it's only a little bit of a minor argument from me.
So I think we want that answered for us in the comments as well. Give us your answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Steve Stone or Brennan Johnson. It's close, but it also comes down to the formation that you can. If we're playing a 4-4-2, it's Steve Stone's getting picked on the right, isn't he? So, but we're not playing a 4-4-2. We're playing a 4-1-2-3.
What a formation! Right, that does the squad. All that's left to do now is to debate the manager. Now, for reference, I've got no idea who you're going to go for, David, and you've got no idea who. I mean, we might go for the same one, so I'll let you go first, and then I'll. Are we
going to try and guess each other's one, or are you just going to?
Oh, okay, all right then.
We're going to. So we're going to. So you want me to say what I think you're going to say at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay, I think you. All right, you ready?
What are we both going to say?
3, 2, 1, and say.
All right, go for it.
3, 2, 1. You're going to say Steve Cooper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I knew you were going to say
I'm reader. Yeah,
why are you saying Steve Cooper, Max?
Because Steve Cooper was the first manager for Forest in the Premier League in 23 years. Kept us up in a really difficult season. Played some very good football. Got some very big standout results. Just those wins at Chelsea, the win against Arsenal, Liverpool. There was some good wins in kind of that top 6 category. I think you've got to realise as well that Cooper didn't have it all plain sailing at times. Forest fans only get a small glimpse into really what goes on behind the scenes at Forest, and Cooper struggled, believe me, behind the scenes, and there was some people that really didn't get on well with him. However, I think he navigated the club through some interesting times, and he was the first manager to get us back to the Premier League. Yes, no, I know, but you have to realise he was the first manager to do it and then keep us up. And I just think that he did. You've got to remember, this guy had never managed in the Premier League before, up until when he came to Forest. And people will argue, well, that's why it cost him his job, and he's a good Championship manager and all of this. But Steve Cooper, that I just think he is a legend. If Forest did a statue of Cooper, I'd have no complaints. And I think you've got to understand it as well from my lifetime and like my age of people. Steve Cooper is the best. Don't get me wrong, Brian Clough is the legend, of course that. But in terms of my lifetime, Steve Cooper is number one. With think about how many rubbish managers we had that would come out in the media and just talk.
You count them on this podcast the other day, wasn't it 20 or something?
It was ridiculous. Literally, I can't. Honestly, I would probably forget loads. And I just think Cooper's. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I met him and he was. I spent a bit of time with him and he was just an all-round top bloke. I'm going to say Steve Cooper. What about you? Tell me yours.
The question is, all-time Premier League manager for Forest, or the manager that we've got available to choose from to manage this team? So given that we've got We can have Frank Clark. We can have Brian Clough. We can have Stuart Pearce. We can have Ron Atkinson. We can have Dave Bassett. And we can have Steve Cooper. And
which was the one that went into the wrong dugout?
Ron Atkinson went into the wrong dugout.
Lee Carsley did that actually the other night for England.
I've actually changed my answer since we've done this podcast based on that last sentence thinking. So that might give you a hint, Maxie, if you want to guess who I'm going to say.
I've got a feeling you might go for Frank Clark.
I was going to go for Frank Clark.
Oh, right, yeah.
But I'm switching to Brian Clough. And the reason why I'm switching to Brian Clough is even at the end, I think if he'd have had the quality of this team, he would be the man to manage this team, given the personalities and the players that are in it, and what he made some personnel choice mistakes at the end of his tenure, signing a bunch of players and letting Des Walker go. But that's not the problem he's facing here. He's facing just managing and getting the most out of this squad. It's tough to go past and ever do anything Nottingham Forest related and not pick Brian Clough. But Frank Clark, I love you as a human being and the contribution you made. So I given that it's basically his team plus Roy Keane and Morgan Gibbs-White and Keylor Navas, it would be tough to not have him as the manager. So it's certainly close. I guess that's another one for the questions. And then quickly, I drew up the squad. So in terms of a 25, these are the players that made my 25. So running quickly through those. Backup goalkeepers, Dean Henderson and Mark Crossley. The backup right back was Nico Williams. I went with Renan Loddy, but we could have run with Inga Haaland as the backup left back because he covers more positions. Murillo obviously is in the squad. And then I go Peak Felipe in our return to the Premier League. I think that season where he came in, he was absolutely brilliant. David Phillips, I've already mentioned. The centre midfield spot, I've currently got it for Scott Gemmell, just gets in, but I reckon that could be won by someone. Backup attacking midfielder, I've got Nigel Clough. He banged in 10 goals in that first season in the Premier League and then was re-signed by Stuart Pearce. And then, look, this guy, he was unlucky not to make the team. The great Ian Wone, in today's day and age, he would have been a great left winger as well. So Ian Wone's terrific. I've got Taiwo, I've got Brennan, and the last position in the squad, Max, I'm going to find a spot for Pierre Van Hooijdonk. So that is my squad of 25 of Nottingham Forest's all-time top Premier League 11. Geez, that was fun. It took me hours.
Yeah, it was. I can imagine. Our lovely producer Dan is going to hopefully flash up a graphic now, which will show our team in full. So there it is, and have a look at that. And obviously, let us know what you think in the comments below if you are listening on Spotify and Apple. Give us a tweet if you've got X or whatever it's called these days, or you think you can comment on Spotify now, actually. New feature. So try that out for us and let us know your Forest best 11, whether you agree with me, agree with David, or you think we're both talking rubbish and you're going to completely go with something different. Do let us know.
I'll just say, if you want to disagree with you and I, we can talk about it for 20 minutes and then we'll walk out of the room and you'll all agree that Max and I were right all along, as the great Brian Clough once said.
Spot on. That sounds all right to me. And obviously, you know, if anyone wants to debate loads, they can come on the podcast. We always like to get new voices on. Right, that does us nicely. Really hope you enjoyed our Forest all-time best Premier League 11 during the international break. We shall be back this week after taking a little bit of a short break the last few days. We will be back this week with a preview for Forest, obviously away to Liverpool. Mate, I'm making the trip to Anfield. Can't wait. Really looking forward to next week, actually. First away game of the season for me as well. So really looking forward to that. Sorry, David. I know it sounds like I'm rubbing it in, but I will.
Well, get out there, Forest fans.
I'll FaceTime you, mate. I'll FaceTime you from the ground.
From a ground would be terrific. It'll be 2 a.m. and I'll be watching in bed, but I will be awake.
Getting more noise complaints. We know what you're like. Right, that does us nicely. Give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us across Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Like I say, we'll be back this week with more episodes. Thanks for all the support. And from me and David with our best Forest Premier League 11. Come on, you Reds.